So how does porn decrease masculinity in men? Why is the growing demographic for the use of that Viagra 20-something men? When I first began teaching Tantra, the number one question I got from men all over the world was, I've been watching porn since I was 12 years old. I'm addicted to it. I have huge anxiety being with women or partners. Will Tantra help? So combined with experiences of my own, I began researching porn and talking to people and finding out what was going on. And I'd like to share that with you. So the first part of this video, we're going to talk about all the ways that porn decreases the masculinity in men. And we're going to talk about the solution. And then we are going to talk about tantric lovemaking and how that's different. It's one of the reasons I actually began teaching Tantra publicly. I was always afraid of, being seen as some kind of sex addict or something. And then someone said to me, they said, Tantra's the opposite of porn. It's exactly what the world needs. So I'd like to share how exploring something like Tantra, it doesn't have to be Tantra, but something like that actually strengthens us, makes us feel more masculine or more feminine, depending which side you're on. The number one way that porn decreases the masculinity is through multiple ejaculations a day. Normally this wouldn't happen. We don't normally have partners that want to have sex that often. And it's a lot more involved and complicated and intricate to actually be with another person. Whereas when you can get porn on your phone, a little clip here and there, it's easy to ejaculate multiple times a day. Why wouldn't you? Right? It's pleasurable, it's fun. In the West, we don't really have great ways of explaining this, but in the East, in Chinese medicine, they talk about qi and jing. Qi is the energy that flows through our body. Jing is like a pot of energy that we're born with that we can add to and we draw from it. And when we draw from it too much, too heavily, we become de-energized. We become literally exhausted, depressed, just having no oomph in life, including in the bedroom, including allowing us to have orgasm, erections, right? The number one way to deplete our jing, as a woman, it's having babies and our menstrual flow every month. And for men, the number one way of depleting it is ejaculation. One of the problems when we only ejaculate with porn is nothing is received. In normal lovemaking, there's giving and receiving, right? You get to be touched, you get to kiss, there's love making, there's love exchanged, there's a circulation of energy, which is very different than a simple outpouring of jing over and over and over again. So you can imagine, especially for young men who, say, came into puberty after 2006 when porn became regularly streamed on phones or computers or whatever, when you didn't have to go and rent it or go and get a Hustler magazine and hide it from your parents. You wake up in the morning, watch a bit of porn, you come, or you don't need porn in the morning, but then after school, later that night, whatever. To ejaculate 3, 4, 5 times a day, it's really not that big a deal. I've known men that, if they're home, if they're not working, might be 10 times a day. That will deplete your jing so quickly. That would be like, I know guys don't normally like hearing about this, but it would be like a woman having her menstrual period heavily every single day for 10 years. There'd be nothing left, right? Or constantly having babies. It's exhausting. It literally drains your life force. So if you ejaculate multiple times a day or even daily without anything coming back, eventually that jing will deplete. Well, actually pretty soon it will deplete. So then what happens is this jing is depleted and it's harder to get an erection. Well, this touches a man on such a deep primal level. The inability to get an erection it does something really crazy to the psyche, right? Like it's not just, oh wow, I didn't get hard. It's like a deep primal failure. It's no small thing. So there's this other program that kicks in that says you got to do anything to get this going again. So you watch porn that's a little bit edgier, a little more violent, or a little more different, or a little something, just to get that click again, because the body, the deep primal wiring says, you've got to be able to get it up. This is really important for our survival. But the problem isn't you. There's nothing wrong with you. Your tank's just empty. And this is a really big deal. This inability to get it up with regular stimulation or just simply the sight of a naked woman or a man, whatever you like, this should be instantaneous. It shouldn't be difficult. And as soon as it is, there's not something wrong with you. Your tank's just empty, and it needs to have time to refill. But if we live in this state of lacking this primal confidence, it creates so much anxiety. It can lead to depression. It can do all kinds of things, because all of a sudden, well, it's embarrassing enough if I can't get it up by myself. If I'm with someone else and I can't get it up, well then I don't want to be with anyone else. I don't want to explore. I don't want to do that. Like I can't risk that failure. That's a really big deal. As humans, we're designed to connect with each other. We're designed to make love together. We're designed to touch each other. We're designed to be intimate. To have anxiety around this kind of performance, it's really damaging to our psyche. So it's really worthwhile, if there's anything we can change in what we're doing to alleviate it, because again, there's nothing wrong with you, right? It's just that the tank's empty. We were not designed as humans to ejaculate that much. So that's the first one. The second point is that a lot of porn, not all, but a lot of porn portrays men in the feminine role. And what that means is, in true masculine-feminine unity, the masculine is in the giving role. It doesn't matter whether it's in life or in intimacy. The masculine gives, the feminine receives. A lot of porn portrays men in the receiving role, that the woman or the other is servicing them. They are doing it to them and they are receiving. As enjoyable as this is, it sort of comes from that king perspective, right? We have the king who is the tyrant and the king who is the benevolent leader of the people. The benevolent leader serves the people. They are a great king, right? The tyrant king, everyone serves him. And a lot of porn has that feel to it, right? So as much as it's pleasurable, or it seems pleasurable to kind of be in that I am in control, you service me thing, it doesn't create any energy inside of you, right? Masculine energy gives. It's that creation energy, that manifesting, that building energy. It's that I'm making a difference on the planet. That's masculine energy. It's not sitting back, kind of waiting for someone else to do something. That's not masculine at all. So to actually make love in a way that you're doing, you're caressing, you're invigorating, you are energizing, you're doing all these things, that's what makes you feel like a man, right? Porn does not normally, I know there's exceptions, porn doesn't reflect that. It's different. I mean, I'm not quite sure how it could necessarily, but it's not like that. And so to have those patterns, especially at a young age, because who are we kidding? In our society, nobody talks about sex, right? When we're young, we're basically told, don't do it, use a condom, and here's all the diseases you might get, So what are we left with? So of course we watch porn. But the problem is, it makes us horrible lovers. Really horrible. Women too. I know lots of women who watch porn, especially when they were young, because they wanted to be great in bed. They wanted to be able to make their partner happy. But it's probably the worst kind of sex there is. It's not even good in normal sex, let alone something like tantric intimacy, it's sort of the kind of sex that makes you perpetually have to try tricks and toys and multiple partners and all this because it's so shallow, you know? So it's kind of a dangerous thing. So that kind of blends into the third point, is that it actually teaches really, really bad sex. On the flip side of this, I'm going to kind of jump ahead because this feels really depressing. When we don't have porn pictures in our minds, the reality is that you already know how to make love. These bodies are designed to make love. We don't need porn. We don't need anything. What we need is a blank slate inside and actually get to play together like we've never touched another human being. Because the reality is, as soon as you touch, there's pleasure there. And the bodies naturally make love. The key, so again, as a Tantra teacher, the number one thing I need to teach, or I tend to teach, and the hardest thing, is to get rid of all the ideas of what makes great sex. And get rid of all the things that we think make us great lovers. You know? Because it all keeps us in our head and out of our bodies. And these bodies are literally orgasmic receptors. And if we're just lost in our head, going through steps of things we've read or things we've seen or fantasies we want to play out, we're not even in our bodies to receive the pleasure that's happening. So the next challenge is there becomes this hyper-focused on visuals and the penis. Because when we're watching porn, of course, it's this stimulation, actually, that's putting the pictures in our mind, that's creating the fantasy that, stimulates us. And then there's this hyper-focus on the feeling in the penis. So I'm going to tell you a story. I remember when I first was with someone who had been watching a lot of porn. I'd never quite experienced this kind of lover before because, first of all, instead of touching me, he would touch himself. If he couldn't get it up, right? He would sort of just roll off and just sort of play with himself while I just sort of laid there. And I couldn't quite understand what he was doing. I'd never experienced that before. And then when he got hard, he'd be inside of me, but he was actually watching himself. He was sort of like kind of doing the moves, but we was watching himself going in and out. And I was lying there looking at him thinking, what are you doing? Like it was almost like I wasn't there at all. It was just the strangest feeling. And this is a common pattern of this hyper-visual focus and this hyper-penile focus. So not only do you miss out on actually getting to touch and caress and feel the energetic interplay with your partner, personally, all your pleasure is in the penis. And you are your entire body can be orgasmic. It isn't just the penis. And this is the challenge, especially when porn was kind of an early influence. It literally becomes eyes and penis. You very seldom sort of touch other parts of your body when you're watching porn because it's a very focused exercise. So it's a very interesting thing to sort of get that patterning out of our minds, which is very possible. Our brains are very plastic. They're easily changed. And when we stop that pattern, we naturally desire to touch. We naturally desire to be touched. We naturally move the focus outside of the penis. And everything changes. But it's really important to note that, especially if you've watched a lot of porn, how focused we are here and here. Because it just doesn't actually lend itself to great lovemaking with other people. So the last point I want to talk about is that there becomes a massive lack of sensitivity in the penis when there's that much ejaculation, that much masturbation. So there, a lot of guys sort of call it, that they need a death grip, right, to actually feel anything. And this is really common, not just with porn. It's something that I teach a lot in Tantra, because in Tantra, it's more about the actual connection of the bodies. And this is same-sex or heterosexual. Instead of, so in regular sex, for example, in procreative sex, I would call it, there's sort of this like pumping that goes on, right? Which is needed to ejaculate to make babies. But we don't tend to go past that because we're not taught anything. So one of the number one things we teach about in tantric intimacy is to actually, you do all this beautiful stimulation and connection and create all this magnetism between the people. And then the bodies simply connect. They just fit together, like a plug in a socket. There's no need to keep going in and out because the energetic, the electrical current pulls you together, and then something else completely magical happens. But after years of sort of this procreative banging style sex, everybody becomes desensitized. Women become desensitized. Their vaginas become like solid walls and they can't feel it, so they need to be stimulated in other ways to have orgasm. Men, the penis is the whole shaft is completely desensitized, so they need other stimulation. This is not how we're designed, right? If the only time we were going to have procreative sex like that was to only have babies, it would be fine. You would have all the sensitivity you needed. But because we don't understand how to actually connect sexually beyond that, we do that all the time. And every time we decrease the sensitivity in our genitals, we have to spice it up. We need to do it harder, faster, stronger, all these things. We become hyper-focused on penis size, boobs, all these things that have nothing to do with anything. It doesn't increase pleasure, it doesn't do anything like that. So it becomes very twisted. So it's not just masturbation that causes the desensitization, it's also just if we have like procreative sex all the time. And it doesn't matter if you're actually wanting to have a baby. I just mean that style of banging sex. So that desensitization limits pleasure, right? So you have the most erotic, erogenous, pleasurable zone of your body completely desensitized. This is no good, So this is one of the advantages to backing way off, which is what we're going to come to next. Because the solution actually is going cold turkey. There's a great book called Your Brain on Porn. I highly recommend this book. And he talks about all the research, all the thing, and it's written by a guy, which is definitely easier to hear and understand than from a woman. But one of the things he talks about is when porn first started being streamed in 2006. Men, of course, obviously were all over it. Women too, but men are certainly the number one consumers of porn. And a lot of guys, especially IT guys, who spent a lot of time in computers, they were kind of the early adopters of this new technology. And a lot of them found out that pretty soon they were starting to have a lot of issues with erectile dysfunction. And then someone along the line said, well, the only thing that's changed is how much porn I'm watching. And it's not just the watching of the porn, it's the ejaculation, right? It isn't just that porn is evil or something. It's that there's ejaculation that goes along with it. So a few of them just tried to stop. They said, well, screw it. I'm just going to quit it for a while because I really don't want to have issues with getting hard. And all they did was stop watching porn. They stopped masturbating. And the problem went away. Their erections were just fine. And it was just like that. So they started doing these no-fap forums. And it really is that simple. And it kind of sucks, And I'm not saying that porn is evil or anything like that. And I'm not saying you could never watch porn again. But if you're having any issues like this, anxiety, depression, lack of energy, inability to get erections, basically you should just be able to think of something and get an erection, right? It really should be that easy. It's really worthwhile looking at. The other book that is excellent is called The Brain That Changes Itself. And it's all about neuroplasticity, if you kind of geek out on this kind of thing, and how the brain changes with new patterning. Like, it's really amazing. It's It's a bit of an older book and not so focused on porn, but it's a really interesting book if you're into this kind of thing. One of the number one things that matters in Tantra is that we actually genuinely connect. We actually get seen by another person because it's the connection that matters. You know, how do you make love for hours and hours? It sounds crazy, right? But it's the same way that when you're doing something that you're enjoying, time slips away. You're not watching the clock. It doesn't matter whether you're, playing football with the guys, or you're sitting having a great conversation with someone, or you're just painting a picture, doing something you love doing. Time slips away. And it's the same thing. When you're making love with someone, you're just enjoying making love with them. It's not about making the other person come or making each other ejaculate or anything like that. You're just enjoying the pleasure of touching another human and being intimate and being inside of another human and kissing and all these things. There's no goals in it. That's the difference. And the pleasure just lasts and lasts and lasts. It's kind of like drawing out the most pleasurable thing you could possibly imagine. But within that, you get seen. And as humans, we need to be seen. We need someone to look at us and look at us with love. And this is a really big deal. And it's a really big deal when it comes to overcoming addiction to anything. A lot of great people say that the number one reason we become addicted to anything is a lack of connection. And Tantra does give us that. It teaches us, it opens us up first to being even able to connect with another person. Then you actually get to experience that kind of connection. That's a really big deal. The other thing Tantra does is it literally allows us to experience pleasure in a whole different way. Whereas in sort of normal sex or masturbating with porn, it's a very physical experience and often very linked with fantasy that has nothing to do with the world. But to have pleasure right here on the planet with another person or even by yourself, but you're actually present and connected with yourself, it nourishes us. It makes us strong. It builds our confidence. It makes us happy to be alive. It makes us happy that we were born. The other beautiful thing about tantric intimacy, and I don't want to get caught up in the word tantra, it just means human intimacy, like real, genuine, heartfelt connection, is that it does allow us to polarize into the masculine and feminine. And again, this is for same-sex couples, heterosexual couples, everyone. But allows us to polarize into the polarity that strengthens us the most. And when we can do that in intimacy, it extends into our entire lives. We feel stronger and more receptive in everything, in work, in our creations, in everything we do. And that's a really big deal. And when we can experience this polarity, what happens is you get this magnetism rolling between you and the other person, which circulates pleasure. You actually genuinely feel the pleasure of another person because you're so magnetically connected, almost like an electrical circuit. Once an electrical circuit joins with another, that energy moves through the whole circuit. It isn't this circuit or this circuit, my pleasure, your pleasure. It literally becomes this circuit of pleasure that everyone experiences. And there's something deep inside of us, which I actually think sort of feeds the porn desire. There's something deep inside of us that knows that so much more is possible. Like there is a height of pleasure that is so far beyond anything we've ever experienced, whether through masturbation or even just regular sex. And I think on some level we're always seeking this. Like we're always seeking this height of excitement, this height of pleasure. But of course we can't get there through just normal procreative sex or masturbation, especially with porn. But I think that's why we always play those edges, because we know that deep down it's possible. And that's why for me, when I first found Tantra and I first understood this, because I had little moments, early on in my sex life, of these really expansive, holy shit experiences, but I couldn't repeat them. And then when I discovered Tantra, I realized not only could I repeat them, it just became the norm, because I had to change. I had to shift. And once I shifted, it all became easy. It all became, well, yeah, that's how humans connect. That's how humans make love. And nothing else is really possible after that. So it really, really changes what we even imagine pleasure to be. It sort of takes this very physical, small, limited pleasure and just expands it into this whole other world. And once we experience that, it's like we go, oh, I knew this. It kind of just creates this, I don't know, lovely joy inside that, that we finally arrived. Sorry, there's a bug on the camera. So going forward, I highly recommend reading one of the books, both of the books, exploring something like Tantra. I have lots of online courses if you want to explore that, or send me an email, ask me questions, what could help. The book Your Brain on Porn is brilliant. But really, just simply giving it a break for a while. Just even as an experiment. And just doing your own experiment with the universe and seeing how it works. Because especially if you are a man who desires that masculine energy in life, in lovemaking, it's what strengthens you, right? It's what makes you feel whole. It gives us confidence in every single moment of our day, which is why I really wanted to share this with you today. If you have any questions, feel free to email me, check out our website, see if anything looks right for you today. I hope you have an awesome day.